The other day, somebody asked me what tools I use to make the fighter kite. Well, I think I've shown what I use most of the time whenever I show making a kite, but why not show just that alone? So here it is. First of all, it depends on whether I'm going to hot cut or knife cut the sail material that I'm using for the kite, as to whether I use a cutting mat like this, which is a 24 by 36 inch cutting mat that I actually had to cut down to 30 inches. It's a perfect size. And that's what I use when I use a knife to cut polyfilm or Orcon or Tyvek or whatever material I'm using for my sail. But if I'm going to hot cut and use a soldering iron like this portable one here, could be a pencil soldering iron, it could be anything that gets hot enough to melt the material you're using for the sail. I use glass, a piece of tempered glass, and it's about the same size as my cutting mat. It's about 34 by 24. Now, it's much larger than what I need. I don't think I would need it bigger than 24 by 24. And because most of the kites I make, fighter kites, are not that big, so it's pretty easy to fit them on that size. So if I'm using a cutting mat and then I'm using a knife, either a utility knife or an X-Acto knife. That's what I use to cut out the sail. I use scissors to cut almost anything, of course. I use felt tip markers. And when I'm gluing, I have liked Weldwood contact cement for gluing any synthetic material. I put a little bit from this can into this bottle, and then when I'm applying it, I use this flexible tip to a syringe, and this just pulls off. And I just buy the syringes. They're very inexpensive. I don't remember if I got them on Amazon or where. And the same with these. You get 100 of these for like $2 or something like that. It's a very reasonable price. But I put this, I open up my glue container, I put this in, and then just suck the glue, into the syringe, wipe off with a piece of paper towel the excess glue, then I just slip this tip on it, and then I cut the tip to create the diameter of the amount of glue that I want to spread onto my kite. And this allows a very precise amount of glue, and glue can be quite messy, and this helps to minimize that a lot. So then after I have applied the glue, if I want to spread the glue, what I use is a piece of a pipe insulation that I have just cut a slice of, and I change the shape of it with a pair of scissors to be the width that I want to make the bead of glue that I put. If I want to spread it, I just make that size, and it spreads very easy, and this does not absorb the glue, so it's really nice. And that's basically the tools I use for making the sail. When cutting carbon fiber, I use a wire cutter. I got this at, I think, Home Depot. And it has a little notch here, which is good for round rods. And then it uses a flat space that I use for the flat ones. Works real good, but the ends of the carbon fiber are quite jagged after the cut. So I use a piece of sandpaper that I glued to one of these popsicle stick, the tongue depressor type things here, and I just wipe the end of it on that a couple of times and makes it smooth, easy to work with. Toothpick, a round toothpick is one of my most favorite tools, along with waxed paper. Pieces of waxed paper are just invaluable when making a fighter kite, especially when using glue. I use masking tape quite often to hold the sail and or the kite in place while I'm working on it, so that I can count on it not moving around while I'm attempting to do something. I use rubbing alcohol to wipe down and clean the glass surface if I'm going to be hot cutting a kite. What I do is I use a spray bottle filled with water, plain water, and I spritz the water onto the glass surface. Then I lay the polyfilm or whatever, or Orcon or whatever material I'm using, Icarex, onto the wet surface, and it just sticks to it and makes it extremely smooth, and you can get all of the air out from underneath it pretty easily without stretching or distorting the sail material itself, which is quite important to keep it neutral. And once that's done, then I begin making my kite. But the kite material, the sail material, is very flat onto the glass surface and very smooth. And it stays that way for quite a long time. You don't have to worry about re-wetting it unless you're waiting a long, long time in between what you're doing to the kite itself. I use a couple of rulers. I prefer stainless steel rulers. One 24-inch, which I need because the kite width from wingtip to wingtip is usually somewhere around 20 to 22 inches, so I need a 24-inch one. And then this one's 18. It's just easier to handle. You only need one. If you're going to get one, get 24-inch. When I hot cut, I use this. This is something I bought on Amazon. It's rechargeable. It's pencil-like. It heats up quickly. And the tip is small enough so that when I'm cutting my holes for my bridle line and so on, I use one of these shields, which is an eraser shield, and I just put that down, use masking tape to hold it, and cut right through the hole there, and it helps control and minimize the size of the hole, so it's just the right size for the bridle line to fit through. And then when I'm making a kite, I use something called a bow setter. This is the one I use most of the time. It can be made out of cardboard, it could be made out of wood, it could be made out of, like this one, aluminum. But it is simply notches that I have cut with a file into the edge of this. If I'm using a piece of cardboard, I would just cut it with a knife. And these notches line up with the wingtip to wingtip dimension of the kite plan I'm making. And as you can see, I have a lot of different ones because I make a lot of different kites from different plans. So each one has its own position here, and this makes putting the bow into the kite very easy, and it also allows me to make the bow length the exact length the plan calls for when I'm making the kite. I don't have to later recut it because I made it too big. And then if I'm going to decorate polyfilm by removing the ink on it, and if you use polyfilm, you're probably familiar with the fact that what it is really is a piece of clear plastic with 2 layers of ink on one side of the plastic. The first layer is silver, which shows through the clear plastic on the back. The next coat of ink is colored, in this case red. Well, if I want to change the coloration of my kite, I often use acetone, or I use rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol is not as aggressive, and it takes a little more rubbing to make it happen, but they both do the same thing. Bleach will also do it, and it removes, depending on how hard you rub, it removes either just the colored portion, the colored ink, or if you continue to rub, it'll rub off also the silver ink underneath, leaving a clear space on your kite. So acetone, even though it's kind of stinky and certainly toxic to breathe much, it does a great job of just removing the ink off of the polyfilm very easily. So you can make different patterns, and sometimes I do that. It's kind of fun. And then the other thing I need some super glue. And super glue is something I use this way. I put a little dab of it on a piece of wax paper, and then I use a toothpick and use the toothpick to put the glue actually where I want it. Super glue is, in this case, it's very runny. You can also get gel forms of it, but it's very runny and it dries fast, and if you get it on your fingers, you're in trouble, so you don't want to do that. But using a toothpick this way makes it very easy to get it exactly where I want, and just a tiny bit that I want there, and in just a few minutes it's dry, or a few seconds sometimes. So these are the tools I use, and basically how I use them. I hope this is helpful for you.